Hey there, it's James. I just wanted to step in before the podcast started. We recorded this full entire episode, unfortunately, prior to being aware of the audio issues in the episode. So you'll notice that on Jess's end, it does sound a little bit different than usual. It's a little bit muffled, unfortunately. But we did record the entire episode unaware. So we are aware of the issue, but we decided to publish anyways. So please enjoy.
Welcome to Paper Quest. I'm Jessie.
And I'm James.
And we're two friends teaming up in our ongoing quest through the Infinite Library.
Each episode, we get together to discuss our latest buddy read, swap stories on our recent solo reads, and talk about the upcoming books we look forward to reading next.
This is Paper Quest.
Alrighty, so on today's episode, we have our new main quest. We have read Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. Shall I start with a summary?
Sounds good.
Alright, so this time I know we usually write our own. I think the published summary says it best. There's really no other way to say it. It's a very short and quick book. So here we go. In a small back alley in Tokyo, there is a cafe which has been serving carefully brewed coffee for more than 100 years. But this coffee shop offers its customer a unique experience, the chance to travel back in time. In Before the Coffee Gets Cold, we meet four visitors, each of whom is hoping to make use of the cafe's time-traveling offer in order to confront the man who left them, receive a letter from their husband whose memory has been taken by early onset Alzheimer's, to see their sister one last time, and to meet the daughter they never got the chance to know. But the journey into the past does not come without risks. Customers must sit in a particular seat. They cannot leave the cafe. And finally, they must return to the present before the coffee gets cold. That is the summary, but might I add, there's also a dozen more rules that drive me crazy.
I have them written down.
Do you want to finish off the rules for us if you got them written down?
So the rules are that there is nothing you can do in the past that will change the present. The only people you can meet while in the past or future are those who have visited the cafe. You can only sit in a specific chair, and that's only when the ghost that lives there leaves the chair to go to the bathroom, which is once a day. You cannot leave the chair while you're in the past. And if you don't drink all the coffee before it gets cold, then you will become the ghost in the chair. And finally, you can only use the chair once in your lifetime.
Yes. So how do you feel about the rules and your initial spoiler-free thoughts in general?
I thought the rules were interesting because there are some rules that are clear and well known, like you have to sit in the chair, but there were other things as the story unfolded where the proprietors of the cafe were like, oh, maybe that's a rule. Like it's an ongoing understanding of this ability that the cafe has. In general, I did suggest this book because I saw it on a lot of, like, if you want a quick, short, kind of wholesome, get you out of a reading slump kind of book, this is a good one to go to. And we do read a lot of really ginormous books, and so I felt like it was something that we would need eventually. And for me, and not to be like too on the nose, but my general, like, if I was gonna just describe this to someone who'd never seen it, doesn't know me, I'd be like, it is like having a cozy cup of coffee, and it's just quick and fun and interesting.
Yeah, I agree that it was quick. I in my head I kind of had to. It's divided into four clear stories with a overarching theme going on in the back. It was hard to review the book, but I almost had to review each story on their own because they're all too distinct for me. Like, they're all too, like, this story is much better than that story sort of thing. So
it's more like four short stories.
It's four short stories, and this book is itself based on the play by the same name and the same author.
Okay.
So having known that going into it, I was like, I can see the play. Like, I can see this in my head as a play, and how they divided it into 4 stories. And it's one of my biggest things was like, okay, I know going in this is a play, and I know going in I'm a gigantic sci-fi nerd. I know this is not a sci-fi book, so whatever they tell me about time travel, I just have to roll with it, because you'll find 1,000 problems with it. And I ended up not minding the time travel so much as I did all of the insane rules, where I was like, it's okay to have all these rules, but please explain them to me. Like, why are you a ghost? Why are all these things happening? So it's just one of those things where it's like, well, it's a lighthearted play, and now it's a lighthearted book. You gotta roll with the rules, and this is just how it is. But, that deep part of me wanted more of just like, okay, but why?
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe 150 pages. It's very short. There's no, like, you definitely prefer a really well-established world and clear systems within the world, and like all of that thought out, and there's none of that. That is not this book. So if that's what you're looking for, I would not recommend.
Agreed.
But if you're like, I just want to read something that might be different, this works.
Yes, I agree. I do not. Now, I did not give this the highest rated rating, but it's one of those books, and this has happened a lot recently, where I do not feel that I am the target audience, but I still got something out of it. Not lower rated because it's bad, just lower rated because it wasn't the story or stories for me, but I still have good things to say about it for sure.
So yeah, do you want to jump into some spoilers?
Yes, I think so. I'm just looking at my notes, but I think everything else going forward is going to be spoilers now. So you want to just go story by story and give a quick... Okay, so story 1, I think... Now, I did the audio, I did not own the book, but I think story 1 is the longest, and it's also the most explanatory. Like, they had to shove a lot of information in the story before getting to the story, I feel like.
So, I don't know if you... Obviously, you couldn't see it. I don't know if it registered for you listening to it, but each short story has a title. So, the first one is called The Lovers.
I think they did say the titles. I think I did get that.
But yes, I agree. I think you're right. They had to explain what the cafe was. They had to explain more of how everything worked. And so that was kind of the start of the book and of this specific story.
Yeah, I was getting a little frustrated because it's one thing to explain the rules, because this is a book. You can always go back and reread something if you don't understand it. But for whatever reason, it repeated itself a lot in this first book. Like, don't forget this rule, don't forget this rule. And I was like, no, we got it. You said that like 5 sentences ago. But once you get into it, it's better.
Well, I think too, like, at one point in one of the stories, it might have been this. So the woman who serves the tea, Kazu.
That sounds right. I read this book a while ago.
It is Kazu. Kazu.
Yeah, I'd say Kazu. That sounds right.
So she is the main waitress throughout the whole story. And she's just like, here's the rules. I don't really think too hard about them. And people, especially in this first story, Fumiko.
We'll go with Fumiko.
Okay. I said the same thing 3 times. She's like, but why is that the rule? Why is that the thing? And Kazu's just like, that's the rule. Like, there's no...
I felt very fourth wall that was for the audience, because I'm sure this playwright / author is clever. She's smart. So she's probably like, well, my audience is going to ask the same questions. So I'll just put this character in my shoe, and you can be the audience for me.
So Fukimo wants to return to the past to meet her boyfriend, Goru?
I thought it was husband, but yeah, maybe it's boyfriend.
It's her boyfriend.
Okay.
And she wants to ask him not to take a job in America because she thought, like, this was the one.
Mm-hmm.
They'd been dating for 3 or 4 years, and he literally was like, hey, I'm going to America, bye. Like, and she always knew it was a possibility, but she just didn't pay attention to it. And she gets it in her head that she's gonna get in the chair. So Kazu explains the rules, and she's like, all right, I'm going. And she literally tries to pull the old lady in the chair out of the chair, only to become momentarily cursed and realize that it's a ghost
Mm-hmm.
and not an old lady. So how did you feel about the ghost character?
Unless I missed something, which I don't think I did, I'm really confused by the ghost character because I don't know, like, if you become the ghost,
Mm-hmm.
is your body also physically the ghost? Is your body still somewhere else? Like, do you physically transform into a ghost? I don't really understand that rule.
Yeah, I don't know that they explained it, but you can touch her. She's
Yeah.
a real quote unquote thing. So I think maybe it's more like you're cursed into that position. So it is your body, but you're
I'm wondering if ghost was an
undead.
interesting English translation. I don't know.
True.
Maybe your body was just stuck in this time and that's why you appeared to be some sort of form or ghost. But they did make it seem like they could touch the ghost.
Yeah, they definitely can touch her, and also something that they find out later in the story when they want someone to use the chair, but it's not the time for her to go to the bathroom. So you can only take it when the ghost goes to the bathroom. Kazu gives her coffee over and over and over, and she has to. That's when they say, "Oh, maybe this is a rule," because she has to accept the coffee and drink it. So she's like chugging this scalding hot coffee, and Kazu's just like, "Would you like another cup? Would you like another cup?" And she's like compelled to say yes, and it forces her to go to the bathroom because she just had like 6 cups of coffee in a minute, or whatever it is. Um, and so there is some natural rules of, law, biology
Mm-hmm.
that is
Yeah.
making her take this action.
It just makes you wonder. Okay, is the ghost compelled by some force to do it? Like no question, or if they don't drink the coffee, what's worse than becoming a ghost? Just does their next level of okay, now you're still messing up, so the next bad thing happens, and then if you are the next person to sit in the chair and mess up, and you become the ghost, what happens to the previous ghost? That was my other question that I didn't get an answer to.
I would, for, I don't know if it was stated, but for whatever reason, thought the, I thought the original ghost moved on, was like set free, because she'd been there for like 100 years or something.
Yeah, see, that's where we get into the complications of like you're just supposed to overlook the small details and roll with it, which
Yeah.
in this book is fine.
Um. So I, the woman who's trying to go back to meet her boyfriend, Fukimo, I think she has the best and most full description of her transition into the past.
Mm-hmm.
The description very much reminded me of Willy Wonka or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and Mike TV eating or using the television to make himself into tiny little pieces
Mm-hmm.
and be transmitted from one side of the room to the other. Because they literally talk about her kind of like shimmering away.
Shimmering away and or coming back in like a mist or almost like a
Yeah.
heat wave or something,
Like a
almost like the steam
vapor.
of coffee, like the steam of hot
Yes.
coffee. Yeah.
Um, so she goes and she doesn't beg him to stay. She basically is mad at him
Mm-hmm.
for not caring enough to stay, for not speaking the words she needed to hear at the time, and they have an argument. Um, and then she starts shimmering away.
And part of the issue is, of course, no matter what you say to somebody, you can't change the future, which is a popular theory on time travel. Is whatever happens happened.
Right.
So it was a hard inner struggle because if I was in a position, I would be allowed the chance to see him again. I can't change the future, but at least I can see him. At least I can say
Mm-hmm.
something I wanted to say that I didn't last time, or So I guess that's the definition of bittersweet.
Yeah, it's almost like I mean, in this story at least, you're entering into a memory and you're interacting with the memory.
Yeah.
Um, and so the person in a couple of these stories that they're meeting does respond differently, responds in a, hey, you're being weird. Like, why are you here? Not the way that the memory played out. Um, and yeah, it gives them an opportunity to, you know, she could have cried and got a hug and a kiss, which she didn't get when they parted originally, or, um, something like that. But what does occur is she starts shimmering away, or she yells at him. She's like, just leave then, like all offended. And he starts walking away, and he kind of, over, under his breath or whatever, asks her to wait for him. Just wait the 3 years until I come back.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't change the present, but it changes her trajectory. She's described as this very successful businesswoman and very put together and stuff. She probably could have go find someone else. But that encounter within this time travel experience makes her wait.
She can't change the future from the past, but she changed her own present or future. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
How did you feel about this story, the first story, overall?
It wasn't my favorite story.
No, it was probably my least favorite. Again, not in a bad way, but it was kind of just like, okay, this doesn't really hit home for me. I believe it's the next story we talk about that is the most impactful.
Yeah. I think that this story was, like we said at the start, more of an introduction to how everything works, and it's a little more simplistic.
Simple storyline, not too many twists and turns there.
So the next story was titled Husband and Wife, and it's about Kusagi and Kotake.
That works for me. That sounds close.
Is that? So Kusagi comes to the cafe multiple times a week. He does have early onset Alzheimer's, and he's slowly forgetting everything. And in the first story, you actually see him. He's there. He's reading his travel magazine, and a woman comes and gets him and is like, oh, okay, it's time to go home, type of thing. He doesn't have his wallet or whatever. And in this next story, we find out that woman is actually his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And she's also a nurse, but that she's like a registered nurse, but she's also his caregiver and his wife.
Yeah, this story was much sadder and hit much more in the feels because you and I both have experience with Alzheimer's, and it is extremely sad to deal with, but also frustrating, which is an issue with the story as well, is the frustration and the sadness. So this one hit home the most out of all the ones that we read.
Yeah, so in this second short story, he, like I said, we were already introduced to him existing, but he talks to Kazu like he's never seen her before, but he's seen her for years, hypothetically multiple times a week. And so she kind of plays along and goes, oh, are you here to use the chair? And he says, yes, I'm going to go find my wife and give her this letter I wrote. And she goes, oh, where did your wife go? And he goes, I lost her. Or like she walked away, or like I can't find her. She's missing, type of thing. And then Kotake comes in and is like, hey, time to go, the same thing she's always done. And he's like, who are you? And she kind of has this like very emotional breakdown, and the women actually start drinking together.
Yes.
I don't know if that was before or after her time travel. I think it was before. But she finds out that this letter exists. That's what he's been trying to do, is give past her the letter. And so she goes very impulsively to see if she can get the letter from him.
Yep. And it gets a little a little, I don't want to say cringy, that's just the word I can think of. Not bad cringe, just cringe, like, oh, when she's trying to, like, get it out of him and say what she knows he's already done. He's already written this letter. but he doesn't want to reveal that. It's just kind of just like, oh, just let him do it on his own. I feel so bad about this.
Yeah, it's very awkward, but I think, she's under the limited time. Like, come
Oh
on, like
yeah,
it's already.
extremely limited time. She can only do this once, so if she's ever gonna know, it has to be now or never. But it's just like, oh god, this poor man. I feel so bad for him. It's so awkward.
So basically, in the letter, it was when he had already realized that he had Alzheimer's, and she didn't officially know yet. And so he writes the letter. Oh, and something about him is he never really learned to write. So this was a big deal because earlier in their courtship, she would write him these like novel letters, and he would just be like, I'm good kind of response.
Yeah.
And so she writes him one and goes, hey, like, clearly you're not that into me. If you don't want to, just tell me, like, I'll move on. And his letter back was, let's get married.
Yeah.
And it was just because he was illiterate, basically. So he takes all this time and writes this letter. And I don't think that they word for word ever say what it says, but basically, when she visits him in the past, he tells her, if I don't remember you, just leave. Like, I'm not your burden. I just only want to be your husband. And when I forget you and I can't do anything for myself, like, go live your life. Because they're young. Early onset Alzheimer's can happen at like 40, sometimes even younger. And so he's like, go be free, marry again, have kids. They didn't have kids. And yeah, it's very sweet. And so she finds all this out and is able to return to the present with that knowledge of what's in the letter he's carrying around.
Yeah, I almost forgot about the part where he couldn't read very well. So yeah, I'm like 4 books past this, so I gotta like rewind my brain here a little bit. Yeah, that was very nice, very sweet, and there's no two ways about it. The story is just sad almost from start to finish, but it's good. This is my favorite story in the collection. If I had to rate it, I'd probably give it like a 3 or a 4.
Well, and it helps her make a decision to change her trajectory.
Yep.
She is not going to let him forget her, or if he does forget her, she's not going to stop treating him like her husband. He's not just going to be a patient. And so when in one of the latter half of the book, she shows up to the cafe and he doesn't know who she is. She's like, I'm your wife. I'm sitting here and we're having our coffee like we did yesterday and like we're going to do tomorrow. And he's like, excuse me, can someone help? And the wait staff is just like, it's your wife, dude. Like, nope. And she even insists that instead of calling her by her first name, they start calling her Mrs. Fusagi. So, to like prove a point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's a common theme, thing throughout the stories is even though you can't change the past, you're changing your present. And in the last story, that's a little different, a little backwards, but yeah.
But we'll get there.
Yep. So, story 3, the sister who dies.
Yeah. So this is called The Sisters, and it's Kumi, and
I just like watching you struggle.
I know y'all who are listening cannot see, but we are on video with one another, and it's hard. But basically, there's 2 sisters, and we are actually introduced to the older sister like page 1 of the book. She's just a patron. She owns a like little dive bar across the way from the cafe, and so she's in there all the time. They're friends, and she was the older sister, right? So she hypothetically was supposed to take charge of her family's business, which was an inn like in the countryside, and she was not having it. And every single month her sister takes the trip to Tokyo and asks her to come back to the family inn. which now the younger sister is running. And we find out that the younger sister is in an auto accident on her way home from visiting in Tokyo and passes away.
Yeah, this story hurts in a whole different kind of way because good for this younger sister who shows true love for the older sister because this older sister's kind of a bee. Like,
Yeah,
I
the
understand
older
that you don't
sister.
get along with your own family all the time, but she really stuck through it the years trying to get her, trying to persuade her sister.
Well, and the parents basically like cut her off. They don't
Yeah.
talk to her or anything, and so constantly this younger sister is showing up, and she writes a letter, and she gives it to Kazu, and says like, "Hey, if my sister pops in, here you go. Can you please pass this along to her?" And literally on her way back from handing off this letter, she passes away. So the older sister has to go back and attend the funeral, and her parents won't even look at her. They won't acknowledge her. They think it's her fault that her sister died because if she wasn't in Tokyo, her sister wouldn't have gone to visit her.
Mm-hmm.
And
Classic guilt trip. Yep.
yeah, just really not what you want. So she returns to the cafe and decides to go to that last day when her sister visits and try and see her one last time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as the stories went on, I was like, man, I mean, I know it's a book, but one of the rules being you have to have visited the cafe in the past really works out for these people.
Yeah. So she basically goes, and her sister's like, "Why are you so weird? Like one time I literally chased you down the street because you wouldn't talk to me, and another time you were like ducked under the counter, and like all these weird things." Basically, like the older sister would have like, I don't know, jumped in front of a bus to get away from this conversation.
Ah.
Like she, I mean, so bad. I'm sorry. She would have gone to great lengths to not have this confrontation. And basically she has this conversation with her sister. Her sister's like, "Why are you so weird?" And the older sister says, "You know what? I am going to come back." Tells the memory of her little sister, "I'm going to come back to the inn. And I'm going to help." And the little sister is super excited, but then the coffee gets cold and she has to vaporize into nothingness.
Yeah, and she has to do it when the sister isn't there to see it, so she has to
Yeah, the
pass along the
sister
message.
like ran to the bathroom.
Yeah, she's just like, pass along the message that, I had to go, but like, I'm there for her. I'm not abandoning her. And then as she's disappearing, she gets to hear the back and forth. And she's like, okay, good. Like, I know you said the thing you needed to say.
Well, and then she gets back to the cafe, and Kazu goes, "Hey, by the way, like, I know you just had this, moment with your sister who's just dead, but like, I still have the letter she gave me." And the older sister, when it had happened, was hiding under the counter and literally was like, "Throw that thing away. I'm not reading that." And Kazu had the presence of mind to be like, "Oh, I don't know, I'm going to keep it. It's fine. I'll just stick it in the corner."
Yeah.
And in the note, it said like, "Hey, I really wanted you to come back so we can run this in together and be sisters." And so even though her parents still refuse to talk to her, she's like, "Well, I guess I'm going back." And she literally just abandons everything she's worked so hard for.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought it was sweet. That's such a hard position of like, you're going somewhere that people are going to despise you, at least for a while.
It's a complete life change because it's not just having to get back with your family who, will they even deal with you? Like they've clearly cut you out of the picture. On top of that, it's like, okay, I guess this is my new job now. Like,
yeah, she's totally changing everything she's worked for.
Yep.
She's kind of described. Yeah, she's very much a city girl. She's like wearing kind of outlandish clothes, and I think she sends a picture with an email, and she's like in traditional inn uniform and stuff. Um, and yeah, they're like, oh, she looks different.
Yeah.
So, and then that brings us to the last story, which was my personal favorite story.
Yeah. Remind me, one, there's a scene that happens in an earlier story, I forget which one, where a girl asks to take a picture.
Yes, so that does happen in The Sisters. So it
The
happens in the
sisters. Okay.
story right before. And something crazy happens is a girl shows up from the future in the chair. And everyone's like, who the heck is she? Why is she here? And she's there to see Kai, who is the owner's wife. And we've heard her, she's been in since the start. She's heavily pregnant. And we know she's not handling pregnancy super well. She's very tired and goes and like will sit in the back or like lay down. So when she comes in, the girl's literally like, hey, let's take a picture. And then like vaporizes and doesn't say who she is, why she is, where she is. Obviously she's in the cafe, but
Yeah.
doesn't explain anything. And actually the owner of the shop, which is, no, I can't say that name. Nagare. Nagari.
I'd say Nagari.
So Nagari owns the shop. He's owned it for a long time. And he sits down and is like, are you here to see me? And she's literally like, nope. And he's like, are you sure? And she's like, yeah, I'm sure.
This was
like,
a funny
go
scene.
away.
I like this.
Yeah. And then, you know, the wife walks in and she's like, oh, you know, like, let's take a picture. And it's not even a cute picture. Like, someone blinks, someone turns, like, you know.
She was so, like, the girl was like, okay, we have to do this fast. And then the one she's asking to help her, she's like, but I gotta fix this, I gotta do that. And she's like, I don't care, it just needs to have your face in it, let's go.
Yeah. So then we get to this story called Mother and Child, and we learn more about Kai, and that she was born with a weak heart. I'm wondering if that's a weird translation of maybe it's like I don't know what a weak heart would be, but I mean I do, but like medically I don't know what it would be.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a translation issue. I think they just went with a general term, so it wasn't super specific. But yeah, clearly there's something wrong with, yeah.
Yeah, and we know it's genetic. Her own father died of a weak heart when she was 11. And from that, she's really learned to be, like when her father died, her mom was like, hey, dad's watching and he wants us to be happy. No reason to be grumping around. Let's like enjoy. So she's, from the first page we meet her, she's very bubbly and very positive, even though you can tell she's having a hard time. And so she and her husband conceive a child, and he knows that it's going to be really difficult and bad for her. So he actually wants her to abort the child, and she refuses. She's like, nope, this is my baby.
Yep.
They've been together a long time. And as she, you know, continues on with the pregnancy, the issues increase, and she realizes, like, I need to go to the hospital. Like, this is it. And she actually says to her husband, if I go, I'm not coming back from the hospital.
Yeah.
So she decides that she's going to go to the future and try and see her daughter.
And it's kind of a revelation. They're like, can this work backwards? Can I go forward? And they're like, oh, I guess, like, what date do you want?
Yeah, so she chooses her birthday in 15 years. I think it was supposed to be 10 years, but it was accidentally 15 years.
Yeah.
And she gets to meet her daughter, Mickey. And everyone knows that she's going to be there on that day. So even though her husband and Kazu are not there, like when she shows up, when Kai shows up in the future, there's some random dude behind the counter. He's like, I don't know you. Why are you in my cafe? You know, like, where's my husband? Where's, she doesn't say that, but she says, you know, where's Nagari and where's Kazu?
Yeah, they very specific, because it's a future jump. So before they jump, it was very planned out. Like, hey, we have control over this. Make sure you're here in this spot at exactly blah 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 time. And so when you get there
Yeah.
and it's not like that, it's like, okay, well, something went wrong in the past and I don't know what that is.
Yeah. And so she's there, she's waiting, she's like checking the coffee. She knows all the rules. Um and uh Mickey walks in and kind of is like been waiting for that day for so long
Mm-hmm.
that she almost doesn't want to experience it. And I don't remember who it was, but someone like, oh, it was Mrs. Fusagi
Mm-hmm.
brings her back, like makes sure that she's there and gets her to sit in the chair and have a conversation.
Yeah.
And it was very sweet because they both basically thanked one another for the choices they made. So, um, you know, Kai thanked Mickey for coming to see her in Kai's present day, and for letting, you know, being her daughter. And then Mickey just thanks her for making the choice to even have her, basically.
And it's an interesting jump because from the mom's point of view, when the daughter jumps back, the daughter knows who she is, and the mom doesn't. When the mom jumps forward, the mom knows who she is, and the daughter doesn't. So they never get any time to overlap and even discuss anything other than shallow, surface level stuff. Like, they're brimming with a million questions, like, how are you doing in school? What are your hobbies? And they just can't talk about anything.
Yeah, that coffee gets cold real quick.
Yeah. I
They are not using insulated mugs. They are using, I think it's a silver coffee set.
They make it seem like the coffee gets cold like immediately. I'm like, okay, hold on a second though. Like, find the microwave, put it on the table. Like, give them 2 seconds.
Yeah. So it's very sweet, and they kind of have this moment, and then Kai goes, or we can infer that Kai goes and has Mickey. Mickey survives. Kai does not. And interestingly enough, Mickey, when she's, we learn that she's in charge of keeping the ghosts in check.
Mm-hmm.
So she's now the ghost charmer,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term. And because that's something that's basically one person seems to do. But yeah, that was my favorite story. It was definitely had me tearing up a little bit. And really, I think I liked the last 3. It was the first one that was a lot of like explaining, where I was like, yeah, come on.
The first and third for me were weak points. The first one hit home the most personally, but the fourth one might be the most difficult one if you were to truly live through it. Like, it's its opposite ends. The final story is like, we know nothing about each other and we have a million questions and we're never going to get to meet. Whereas the second story is like, we've lived a pretty decent, fuller life and we know each other very well. It's just sad that you're losing your memory. It's just like opposite ends of the spectrum, and they're both very sad for different reasons.
Yeah. So I also want to talk really quick about the cafe itself.
Yes.
Because I personally felt like the cafe was its own character.
It's not in my notes, but I meant to write that down. They always talk about how people view the cafe when it's a really busy summer. Was it summer? Yeah, like a really busy summer day or whatever, and everything on the main streets are crowded and packed. But then every once in a while, they notice this cute little cafe, and the cafe is in the news. Like, what I appreciate is that they brought the cafe to the larger world's attention. Like, people know the story of, oh, that's the time traveling cafe, but no one could prove it happened. Just like this urban legend type deal. It's really cool.
Yeah, well, and a lot of people who go and find out all the rules are like, well, if I can't change it, what's the point of all of this nonsense?
Which, I'm sorry, you know dang well if you had this option, you would try it regardless of whether or not you could change anything. You best bet I'm traveling in time for at least 5 minutes.
Well, and so you mentioned earlier, the cafe is over 100 years old, and it's really only had minor changes over time. It's kind of set the way it was 100 years ago. It doesn't need air conditioner. It has a creaky old fan, but it stays cold thanks to the ghost. I don't remember who it was, but at one point they were talking about how hot it was outside, like you mentioned. and one of the main people in the shop would, serve the ghost her food and was like, thanks for being here again this summer. We appreciate your natural air conditioning.
Which just further makes the ghost a weird point of the story. I don't get how it's a ghost, but okay.
Again, if you mess with the ghost, it will curse you immediately. It gets real mad and vicious. Don't touch her. But yeah, it was a very cozy little place, and it's not busy, and you can go in and you can wait for this ghost to leave. Because the cafe is one of the few constants in the story, it felt like its own being.
Yes.
In a sense.
No, I think the point, especially in a play, is to make it feel like its own entity for sure. It is quite literally itself full with emotion as each story goes by.
Something I noted is like, really, it's kind of a mundane book. It's nothing. I don't know if mundane's the right word, but there's nothing like. Again, we're not saving the world. We're not changing anything. They're jumping into the past or future, having a moment, and like that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's maybe 5-10 minutes. I don't know how long the travel part takes, but it seems to take long enough to make the coffee lukewarm by the time you're in the different timeline.
Yes.
I
apologize in advance if you guys hear a noise on the audio. That is a lawnmower getting closer and closer. But in case you hear a weird noise. But yeah, the time to travel, like in my mind, things get hazy and steamy and they disappear. But so much conversation happens, like when they're disappearing back to the present, they catch so much detail on their way home, if you will. I'm like, this must be taking a while to transition.
Yeah, I think it's at least a few minutes.
Yeah.
So, I guess the question is, who would you want to see if you could see anyone in the cafe? Because they don't have to be dead. It can be people who, obviously, like, the man lost his memory, or the guy went to America. So, is there anyone, I guess, that you would want to see or talk to for 2 minutes?
Oh my gosh, this is the kind of question I need in advance so I can think about it real hard. Oh gosh. I would probably have to say my dad. He is dead. He died when I was 4 or 5 years old. And that would just be a very interesting, very quick conversation, but that'd have to be my option.
I think that makes sense. How about someone not related to you?
Not related to me. See?
Someone fun.
I don't know.
Not that your dad's not fun.
But it would mean that I'd have to have known them once before. Is there someone... See, everyone that I know... I've lived in the same area my entire life. So the people that I've known my whole life are still here since I've been born. So it's hard to answer that question.
How about someone famous or fictionalized? Because you don't have to know them. They just have to have gone to the cafe.
That's true. I don't, in the nicest possible way, I don't care to meet many people. I just, I stick to close people. I'm not someone who's like, I have to meet this famous person, or I have to meet my favorite author, I just don't think like that. If I had to pick my favorite author, maybe I'd meet Brandon Sanderson.
That's who I thought you were going to say when I thought of the question.
Okay. Because at least he's extremely nerdy like me, so I would feel comfortable talking to him. Like, he plays Magic the Gathering and D&D and all these things, and I watch his podcasts, and it's like, yeah, that's someone you could approach and be like, I'm not going to feel awkward talking about anything, because you already get me.
That's fair.
Okay, what about you? Not to put you on the spot. Oh, you probably already thought about it.
No, actually I didn't. And as you've been talking, I've been like, oh no, I know that the reverse is coming. Which is why I didn't volunteer it immediately. I think personal-wise, I would probably see my grandma. She did raise me and passed like 7 or 8 years ago. And she did have Alzheimer's, so it would be nice to see her again before that. But someone I don't know.
Yeah, that was a secondary answer because both of our grandmas went through a similar experience. So
yes, someone I don't know. This is if you've listened to some other podcasts, you'll totally get this. Um, but it might be Queen Elizabeth II.
Oh. If I had thought about it for a second, I would have thought about that. That without a doubt, I believe that.
Because I'm kind of obsessed with her in the very most healthiest way of like, I would say her or her, what, great great grandmother, Queen Victoria. Um, I have so many questions and just such, like, you know how people are like, choose someone that you want to be like and work to be like in your company or in your organization. I'm like,
Yeah.
Queen Elizabeth is not in my organization. She does not work here.
It sounds
but
almost
that's the
like,
person.
who would you like to be? The Queen. I'd like to be the Queen. Thank you.
You're not wrong. No, she works really hard, and that's something that I definitely like. Uh, is probably the core characteristic of me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Fair enough. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting. I would do it. I assume you would also sit in the chair.
Oh yeah, I would definitely sit in the chair.
So I already know, I think, but what did you rate this book and why?
This is the first time that this is probably going to happen as we're talking. I initially gave it a 2, but I'm kind of thinking I need to switch it to a 3. I think I had to sit with the book and talking about it because obviously no one else in my life that I know has read this book. And I can't talk to you about it specifically until we're together on the podcast.
Yeah.
I think I might have to make it a 3. I might have to update the old Goodreads there. Because now that I've sat with it and let it... Because I was kind of the same way, just like, yeah, that was a book, kind of day in the life, not my speed. But you know what? Maybe there's more to it than I gave it credit for.
Yeah, I did give it a 3. And I didn't rate it immediately. I finished it and probably waited like 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
Because I really wasn't sure. I was like, I know it's not a 5. Because I don't know that I would read it again unless someone else was reading it.
Mm-hmm.
And was like, oh, I want to refresh. Because it's so short. Like, it's literally a couple hours. But I'm glad I read it. It made me smile and feel hopeful. It was one of those stories. It's like, it is really short, but it does make you think. And I appreciate and feel. Like, I definitely, cried a little on the mother-daughter one and felt the panic of, oh no, the coffee's getting cold. Are you going to get stuck there? And yeah, it was, to do that in like 150 pages. It's something that requires talent.
And if anyone is interested and is enjoying the book themselves, there are more of these. They just throw out collections. Yes. They're just like, and more stories. Here's the next volume. Here's the next volume. So you can get all sorts of stories in this cafe, apparently.
Yeah, I've heard that some of the other ones are really good. So okay. I don't know if I will jump on that. I have enough series in my life right now.
Oh god, yeah. I'm starting another one, but I think I might just do the first book and call it. But I'll talk about that next week when we do our side quest.
Yes. So I would recommend. I think it's fun. Get you out of a reading slump maybe. And short, quick.
Easy, if a little sad, but yeah.
Yeah, a little sad.
I do have the synopsis for our next book, our next main quest buddy read. This is a pretty I believe this book just came out. It's called...
And this is, you got me this book for my birthday.
Yes, I got this one for your birthday and bought a copy for myself because it looked really interesting and fun and magical and...
it was not originally on our list.
Nope. I pushed one of my options further down the line, which I've updated on our schedule on Facebook. This one just, when you see a book and it calls you just the right way, and this happened, I was like, I don't know if that book cost $10 or $50, but I'm buying that on the spot. Like, this is just the book that I want.
So I will say I'm like 10 pages in, and I haven't read it. I don't know what it's about other than it has to do with magic and New Orleans. So you're about to enlighten me.
And see, that's what I love, New Orleans. No, I've never been, but I just love New Orleans. I love that vibe. I love all that. And then you just throw in like this magical fantasy setting on top of it. I'm in. I love it. Let's go.
So tell us about it.
I can read this if you want to take your headphones off. I don't want to spoil it for you.
No, it's fine.
And then you can come back on and pretend it sounds amazing and give us your your thoughts. Okay, so this is
No, tell
called
us.
The Ballad of Perilous Graves by Alex Jennings. And I didn't know this until like a day ago, but Perilous Graves is the name of the character, apparently. So it's the ballad of this person. So NOLA, which I believe stands for New Orleans, Louisiana.
It's New Orleans. Oh.
I think it's NO as in New Orleans and LA as Louisiana, which I've never heard before. That's my guess.
Yeah, so my son's family is totally from there, and I've been there before, and I did not know that it was Louisiana.
I just assumed it was all shorthand. NOLA. So
I just thought the whole thing was New Orleans. I don't. Okay.
Either one of us could be
Carry
right.
on.
Okay, so we have NOLA is a city full of wonders, a place of sky trolleys and dead cabs, where I don't know this word, where haints dance the night away and wise women keep the order, and where songs walk, talk, and keep the spirit of the city alive. To those from far away, and far away is capitalized, I think it's a location, NOLA might seem strange. To failed magician Perilous Graves, it's simply home. Then the rhythm stutters. 9 songs of powers have escaped from the magical piano that maintains the city's beat, and without them, NOLA will fail. Unexpectedly, Perry and his sister, Brindy, are tasked with saving the city, but a storm is brewing and the haint of all haints is awake. Even if they capture the songs, NOLA's time might be coming to an end. So I was like, this sounds like an epic fantasy novel set in a magical New Orleans, and I need to read it now.
I think that's what it is.
So I was all over it.
Well, I'm excited to read that. Like I said, I've barely started it. I'm intrigued, and looking forward to chatting about it soon.
Yes, I now own the book and the audiobook. The reason I did both is because I wanted the book to read, but knowing that it was kind of potentially musical, I was like, ooh, I wonder if the audio will do anything fun with that.
Well, I think there's definitely some like Creole type of talking.
Okay.
In it. Which if you haven't, I'm not from that part of the country. If you have not heard someone who actually speaks like that, it is a very distinct way of speaking.
Okay.
So reading it, I'm like, I know that the audiobook would be great of it.
All right. Yeah, I'm excited. So we will talk much more in depth about that one in about 2 weeks' time. Next episode up is our side quest, which I'm pretty excited to talk about my books. I don't know how many you've got going on, but I'm ready for it.
I'm excited. I've got things to say. Yeah, I think it'll be good. Reading slump is over. I'm very excited to be moving into this fall season. I have a massive stack of books. Some of them are scary. Some of them are thrillers. Some of them are romance. But I'm like, I am reading. I am in the reading mood. So grab a cup of coffee and a cozy sweater, and let's move into the next season.
All right. Well, we will see you guys next time. But until then, bye.
Bye.